Have you ever had that feeling where your gut is screaming one thing, but your logical mind is calmly arguing the complete opposite? Yeah, of course you have. We all have. It's this fundamental battle that plays out in our heads every single day between two incredibly powerful and really different ways of thinking.
Napoleon had a great phrase for this feeling of uncertainty. He called it the fog of war. It's that murky cloud of high stakes and incomplete information that makes big decisions so incredibly hard. But here's the thing, that fog isn't just for battlefields. It shows up in our lives all the time. In boardrooms and job interviews, anytime you have to make a big call and the right answer isn't obvious. So back in 2000, the Pentagon decided to try and conquer this fog once and for all. They poured hundreds of millions of dollars into a massive war game simulation they called the Millennium Challenge. The idea behind it was pretty revolutionary. What if modern technology, we're talking supercomputers, satellites, endless data, could finally cut through the uncertainty and make war predictable?
So picture this. On one side, you've got the blue team, representing the U.S. military. They had every advantage you can imagine. Huge teams of analysts, massive databases, complex models predicting every possible move. Their entire strategy was built on pure logical analysis. And on the other side, the red team, led by just one guy, a Marine veteran named Paul Van Riper. He had none of the blue team's fancy tech. All he had was years of experience and a core belief that you just can't predict complex situations like war.
Well, what happened next was, frankly, a total shock. While the blue team was busy analyzing their data and running simulations, Van Riper just acted. He used old-school, unpredictable tactics, like motorcycle messengers to stay off the grid. And in a stunningly fast strike, the red team sank 16 ships, that's an entire naval fleet, in less than an hour. The blue team barely knew what hit them. It was a complete disaster for the data-first approach.
And this, right here, brings us to the real question. If all that analytical power, all that data, can be taken down so easily, what are we missing? What was Van Riper's secret weapon that the supercomputers completely failed to see?
Well, the answer, believe it or not, lies inside our own heads. That whole war game story isn't really about military tactics. It's a perfect, real-world example of the two competing systems that are running inside our brains all the time. Let's think of them as your brain's autopilot and its pilot.
Now, psychologists have a formal name for this. It's called dual process theory. It sounds complicated, but it's actually a pretty simple idea. It just says that our thinking isn't one single process. It's the product of two totally different systems that are constantly working together and sometimes fighting for control.
The researchers who really defined this, Keith Stanovich and Richard West, gave them the pretty straightforward names you see here, System 1 and System 2. A little dry, right? So to make it easier, we're going to stick with our analogy. System 1 is the autopilot, and System 2 is the pilot.
And just look at how different these two are. They're basically polar opposites. Your autopilot, System 1, is blazing fast. It's unconscious, automatic. It's your gut feeling. It's the part of you that instantly recognizes a friend in a crowd. But your pilot, System 2, is the complete reverse. It's slow, it's conscious, and man, it takes real effort. This is the brainpower you have to fire up to solve a tough math problem or carefully read a contract. It's your logical, analytical self. Now, the autopilot is amazing for most things, but it has a real dark side. See, it loves to take shortcuts to save energy, and those shortcuts can lead to some really predictable mistakes in our judgment. We call these cognitive biases. Let's walk through a classic example. This one is called the belief bias, and it's a perfect trap set by your autopilot. It's our natural tendency to think an argument is logical and sound just because the conclusion feels true, even if the steps to get there are totally flawed. Okay, so let's try a little test right now. Is this argument logically valid? All things with a motor need oil. Cars need oil. Therefore, cars have a motor. Now, what's your immediate reaction? The conclusion, cars have a motor, is 100% true. So your autopilot, your gut feeling is probably screaming, yep, looks good to me, makes perfect sense.
But hang on a second. Let's wake up the pilot. If you actually look at the logic, it's completely broken. Just because two things, motors and cars, share a property, needing oil, that doesn't logically prove that one is a type of the other. I mean, chainsaws need oil. Are they cars? No. See what happened there? Your autopilot got fooled because the conclusion was believable, and it took your pilot stepping in to do the heavy lifting and actually check the logic.
And this is the constant tug-of-war inside your head. Your autopilot gives you that quick, easy, effortless feeling of truth. But to override it, your pilot has to wake up, burn some serious mental calories, and analyze the details. And let's be honest, if you're tired or stressed or just not really paying attention, who do you think wins that fight? The lazy autopilot? Almost every time.
Okay, so it might sound like the autopilot is the villain here, but that's not the whole story. Not even close. Because when it's properly trained, that same autopilot, that same intuition can become your single greatest asset. It can literally be a cognitive superpower. And this brings us right back to where we started. Paul Van Riper's shocking victory in that war game, that wasn't a fluke. It wasn't a lucky guess. It was the result of a lifetime of experience that had trained his autopilot to an absolutely elite level. He was using what we call expert intuition. And this kind of intuition is most powerful when we're facing what are called strategic decisions. These aren't simple, everyday choices. We're talking about complex, messy, ambiguous problems with massive consequences. Exactly the kind of decisions you have to make when you're in the fog of war or trying to navigate a crazy business environment.
So here's the key takeaway. In situations that are complex and moving fast, where things are uncertain, just like in the Millennium Challenge, a highly trained autopilot can actually outperform the slow, deliberate pilot. It can instantly recognize subtle patterns from years of experience and make a gut call that's not only faster, but often better than what the pilot could come up with after hours of analysis.
It's like Malcolm Gladwell, who wrote a lot about this, said, "Success isn't about choosing one way of thinking over the other. It's not about being purely logical or purely instinctive. The real art is in finding the balance between the two."
So that's the million-dollar question, isn't it? How do we find that balance? How do we know when we should trust our gut and when we should tell it to quiet down and let our rational mind take over?
Well, the ultimate skill here has a name. It's called metacognition. And that's just a fancy way of saying thinking about your thinking. It's the ability to step back from a situation and consciously decide which tool in your mental toolbox, the fast autopilot or the slow pilot, is the right one for that specific job. And the great news is, this is a skill you can practice. First, just get in the habit of recognizing when the stakes are high. That's your cue to question your first impression. Second, if you feel that mental struggle, that uncertainty, that's a red flag telling you to slow down and engage your pilot. And finally, if you want a smarter autopilot, you have to feed it. You have to build deep experience in an area so its intuition has something to work with. So the next time you're facing a tough choice, a moment where you're surrounded by that fog of uncertainty, just take 1 second. Ask yourself, who's in the driver's seat right now? Is it your fast, intuitive autopilot or your slow, deliberate pilot? Knowing who to hand the controls to, well, that might just change everything.